DW Africa Link.
In the past, I've been polite. I talk as if I'm a preacher like John the Baptist. But now, as president of Uganda, I will be very rough because I have already laid a trap.
Can Museveni tackle corruption in Uganda's parliament? Well, that depends on who you ask. In a recent move, the former Speaker of Parliament, who is a member of the ruling party, was blocked from serving another term due to corruption allegations. But the man who replaced her has also faced corruption allegations in the past. So is President Museveni genuinely committed to fighting corruption, or simply reshuffling the faces at the top? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
From allegations of lawmakers misusing public funds to controversial payouts and accusations of influence peddling, Uganda's parliament has repeatedly found itself at the center of public anger. Critics argue that while smaller officials are sometimes punished, politically connected figures often survive scandals with little consequence. That has fueled growing frustration, especially among young Ugandans already struggling with unemployment, rising living costs, and weak public services. Many wonder if the president can fight corruption in parliament without breaking the political architecture that protects his rule. Let's get more from Yvonne Mpambara, a lawyer, activist, and a former independent presidential candidate. I also have DW's Frank Yiga in Kampala, Uganda. Hello, both of you. Welcome to Africa Link. Yvonne, you go first. Corruption allegations in Uganda's parliament are not new, but how serious is the current situation compared to past scandals?
Thank you so much, Eddie. I'll begin by saying that corruption allegations in Uganda's parliament are definitely not new. Parliament itself has become the symbol of corruption, and it begins with how we look at the former speaker, because now we voted in, the members of parliament voted in a new speaker yesterday. So the former speaker, Anita Among, her situation has become different, not merely just based on the allegations themselves, but the scale of the public backlash. There was a level of international involvement in sanctioning her, but also it has exposed institutional decay to a certain level where the public has realized that, most of these institutions have been laid back when it comes to holding perpetrators accountable, but also there is an excuse around an apparent political fallout amongst the inner circle of the ruling party.
So what exactly is the former speaker who has been prevented from serving a new term? What is she being accused of exactly?
So she has been accused of personal enrichment, where she had amassed so much wealth, and most of it had been amassed through actual public processes where they were tracking a lot of money that had shifted through different accounts towards her personal projects. Towards millions and millions and billions of Ugandan shillings had been amassed in her names, and it was being amassed through different accounts in parliament, but also through different parliamentary processes, like budgets being largely bloated to be able to cater for extra money that goes towards her as a person. But also from the previous search we saw, I think there were a couple of houses that were searched that belonged to her, and the public was shocked because they didn't realize how many properties she owned and how many luxurious cars she had, and all these amassments that were also going through one of her foundations. So as much as we are aware of right now, following what has been reported in the media, it was that level of enrichment where millions of Ugandan shillings had been corrupted, they had gone for her personal use. They were being used for her personal use. So most of it was through those luxurious cars, through the properties, and also to different businesses that the speaker has. So far, that's what the public knows.
Right. Thanks a lot for breaking that down for us. And so, One would argue that it is right, the move that has been made to look into the matter, and it's right that she is not continuing as the Speaker of Parliament. And it seems to be in line with President Museveni, who's been repeatedly pledging to fight corruption. Wouldn't you say so, that this is a good step in the right direction? Or what is making it seem a bit off?
This particular process is off because it's not the first time we're seeing this kind of scandal, but also the process through which a majority of these scandals are handled has left questions from the past. Because I can tell you that from the past scandals that have been reported and that the public has gotten wind of, a majority of these people have never been prosecuted. So we often view President Museveni's reactions to corruption as contradictory, because on one hand, his government has created and showed a certain rhetoric of strengthened institutions. He has created institutions like the State House Anti-Corruption Unit. The Auditor General has an office that is largely catered towards fighting corruption, but also he has created the Anti-Corruption Court. But we can see that most of these institutions have not been able to be independent to prosecute especially high-profile cases. I think you know that one of President Museveni's in-laws, actually the father to our current chief of defense forces, his father-in-law was actually caught in one of the scandals in previous years, and it was one of the biggest scandals the country has ever seen, but up to today has never been prosecuted. So we've seen that some officials and ministers have been investigated, a few have been arrested, but in actual sense, President Museveni, regularly speaks about being against corruption, but we see that major scandals have repeated themselves for decades with limited high-level convictions.
I see what you mean, and I understand the frustration there. Again, considering that the current Speaker of Parliament, who was supposed to replace this lady who has come under fire, the current Speaker of Parliament himself has had some corruption allegations against him, but he's now the Speaker of Parliament. That's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's largely what we're saying. The public has argued and the public has been at the forefront of the fight against corruption because they had reached a level where they were fed up themselves and say pulling out most of the records of how much money has been squandered so far by most of these high profile officials. So they argue that enforcement is largely selective and often targets towards accountability on political weaker figures or people that are of political interest. So people are also taking a very heavy scrutiny towards whether President Museveni truly means what he's talking about. But also this particular scandal was suspicious because it's at a time when there are speculations that his son is manufacturing a way of expanding state, a way of state expansion, a way of taking on to political power. So people have been suspicious because he is the one that put out the drive for accountability towards the former speaker. And at first people were happy and excited that maybe perhaps we might have a leader who acts. But the key questions came around now when these same officers or officials that who are talking about being held up in some of these scandals are also the same people that are being selected for these high leadership roles, like the speaker and the deputy. If you see online, there's a huge campaign now saying that, are we persecuting people from certain regions when we allow certain individuals from some regions where the president comes from to walk scotch-free when they're corrupt? But there is a certain level of witch hunt towards certain particular categories of Ugandans.
Right. Thanks a lot for sharing those points with us. It's been a great discussion so far. And Frank, I'm going to come to you with, based on everything we've heard Yvonne share with us, give me a sense of the mood right now in Uganda regarding these allegations. It sounds to me that people are genuinely fed up with how corruption is being tackled in the country, or am I reading wrongly?
No, you're reading correctly. Ugandans are, of course, fed up because they've had this day in, day out, year in, year out. I mean, corruption is the order of the day. You hear lots of money, as in millions of dollars and billions of dollars being lost. And according to one of the government agencies, Uganda loses about $2.7 billion US dollars, which is quite an amount. If you imagine how impoverished Ugandans are and how money is disappearing in thin air, and we see reports every now and then on how some individuals in government, live lavishly and spend lots of money on their personal projects or businesses. It hurts us so much. So Ugandans were so excited when they heard the news. First of all, they were a little bit excited when President Museveni announced that this time is going to be a term of no corruption, no sleep. Some were excited, others had doubt in his statement. But of course, those who really believed him is when his first strike went to the Speaker of Parliament, whom they regarded as the big fish. To the young people, she's a big fish. Although we've had other big shots, being implicated and prosecuted in the past. But these young people are seeing this for the first time, and they were all excited and says, yes, indeed, this is a step in the right direction. The president seems to be committed to fighting corruption because we've all been following the Speaker Anita Among's lifestyle, her movements, how she conducts herself, how she spends money, the projects and the wealth she has amassed.
Exactly to what you're saying. And if you think about it, when people in power are accused of corruption and you sort of see the lifestyle that they live, and you compare it to the ordinary Ugandan, this is what is really fueling the tension, isn't it? That when people at the top are involved in corruption, or at least accused of it, it's the ordinary Ugandan that suffers, right, Frank?
Definitely, yes. It is the ordinary Ugandan that suffers, and they suffer in so many ways. We go to hospitals, there are no facilities, there's no medicine. Roads are dilapidated. Schools, some schools up country in remote areas study under trees. All these are signs that the money that should have meant for such Ugandans is the money that's being squandered by these top politicians in government. So that's a clear indication that there's a gap, and that gap is caused by those who steal what is meant for these poor people.
And Frank, is there, because in such situations, you would expect that the opposition would put up a strong fight to try to bring some sort of accountability. What's the case with the opposition and what are they doing?
The opposition has tried on so many fronts. We've seen them in parliament. We've seen them at other functions, events, trying to blow. All they can do is talk right now, and talk does not speak. It is action that speaks. They cannot act because their hands are tied. There are laws. You cannot gather. You cannot have a procession. You cannot have placards move around town. Alarm Ugandans on what's going on, because they will be arrested. Their hands are tied. All they can do and talk has no so much effect. Even when the president said that there's too much corruption in the House, and they quoted the president's statements, still there was nothing, because the person they were reporting to was the culprit in all these scandals. So they couldn't do much about it.
Right. Thank you, Frank. And back to you, Yvonne. I guess the challenge will always be how realistic it is to expect meaningful reform from the top, considering that many members of parliament are part of the ruling establishment of the president. So, what can we expect, Yvonne?
It's possible, but it's a very difficult task under the current system. And I think we've largely complained about that as one, the public square, but also the different structures that come from accountability processes like opposition. And it's because the challenge is that many members of parliament depend on the ruling establishment politically and financially. And there's a very heavy patronage network that benefits from powerful actors who continuously, corrupt the public resources. And of course, a lot of anti-corruption reforms have threatened the interests of these powerful actors. So historically, Uganda has seen some periodic crackdowns, and at times they'll pretend that, they've thrown a couple of people behind bars, but there are fewer deep structural reforms. And I believe that long-lasting change would require more stronger institutional work that is independent, because now largely most of these institutions cannot do independent work. Most of them go for the smaller fish, and you realize that the only way they'll act is if the state or the top leadership structure is ably backing them up to be able to prosecute some of the big fish where we can consider the former speaker as one of them. It's only then that they're able to act, but majority of the time they're not able to do that. So we need stronger institutional independence. The public must create more pressure, because also part of how the former speaker was prosecuted is from the fact that in 2024 there was a large campaign from the public on March to Parliament, where a lot of young people were even arrested and thrown in jail when they were protesting against the corruption the corruption happening in Parliament. So you can see that the public, when it creates pressure, we can have some good outcomes. But also the media needs to play a very key role in terms of scrutinizing properly what's happening. It would be very sad to now find out that media is also playing part of a political structure where they're also doing selective scrutiny, because they're probably being paid by the son or something like that, who is more interested in accumulating power for himself than the interests of Ugandans. So we need them to do their work independently, but also free of bias, and definitely political incentives that reward accountability should maybe be put in place, rather than this current system that has largely been rewarding loyalty. So you find that people fight more for majority of these seats in order to serve and acquire more money, because these are the positions that they are using to actually steal. So it is largely very difficult. I would not say it's extremely realistic, because the current system is one that has created this level of corruption. At times we've argued that it's quite a stretch to hold people like the former speaker accountable, and yet the larger structure that has been feeding into people like her continues to exist, and shortly after her they'll create another one. And like you said yourself, they put similar people back in the same structures to continue to work. So it becomes very difficult for us to also take the state seriously when they say they are fighting corruption, but they continue with the same system of patronage that more rewards loyalty than actually coming down on corruption.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Yvonne. And Frank, one key thing that Yvonne mentioned was the role of the media in highlighting these issues and pushing for accountability. How realistic is that on the ground, you as our media guy on the ground? And how free is the media allowed or able to report on such matters and push for accountability?
Well, we try our best to perform our duties ethically. But of course, we get interferences every now and then. Let me give you an example of the recent occurrence. There was supposed to be a talk show on one of the big media houses, a TV station, and then they had the panelists all lined up, and they had been, promoting this subject and the panelists for over a week. And then on the very last day, we received a call from the Speaker of Parliament to include, that was before she was pushed out, to include one of our own to be one of the panelists. So our hands were tied. She had to be fixed in to debate, and her debate was, of course, in support of her, defending the Speaker's actions, and such interferences is what we get, and they've penetrated all media houses. They use money and authority. At times, you find yourself caught between a hard rock and a hard place, a rock and a hard place. So that's how we get interfered with our works. But we try our best. We've seen these things. We've invited opposition politicians, government officials that are against corruption to come and speak, and they speak. I mean, we cannot do further than that.
Isn't that the frustration that, you're trying to do all you can, but even highlighting it doesn't seem to be tackling the problem? That's the frustration, isn't it, Frank?
Hopefully, definitely it's frustrating, Eddie. Hopefully right now, perhaps our president being 82 years, the older, the wiser, he was wise to come up with no corruption, no sleep, sort of a slogan for his term, and we hope that he meant it by catching the big fish in the name of the speaker, and others we hope that he's going to capture. We hope this is going to also to extend to the media to let us do our jobs the way we are meant to, because we had fear. Many journalists had fear in executing their duties because we've seen some of them lose their jobs, by the way, Eddie. Calls come in, they call the managing directors of media houses and they lay off people. We have 3 on record that have lost their jobs because they're speaking against corruption or speaking against such people.
Thank you very much, Frank, for those last words. Yvonne, you have the last words. Moving forward, what really needs to be done now, realistically, that can make the existing institutions, anti-corruption institutions, strong and independent enough to tackle corruption and eventually get rid of it?
We definitely require reforms that go beyond just arrests and public statements, which is majority of the times what largely happens. We need truly independent anti-corruption institutions. We need consistent prosecution of powerful officials, which has been one of the most difficult situations for majority of these bodies to act, because the president himself has been put on record saying that corruption is fine if the developments are happening back at home and the money is not leaving the country. So again, it becomes very frustrating when it's the same institutions that are meant to fight corruption seem to be the ones that are giving it a go ahead, as long as you're stealing in order to enrich your people and you're stealing in order to develop back at home. So we need consistent prosecution of powerful officials, largely to send a stronger message that they are not above the law. But we also need to protect a lot of journalists and whistleblowers that have been doing a lot of this work. You realize that even people from the public square that had been holding some of these officials accountable have faced a certain level of scrutiny now, and some of them, even their accounts were frozen.
Great discussion we've had. We will definitely be following the story inside Uganda. It's great to have you guys on the ground who we can definitely come to see where the fight against corruption is at in Uganda. So we'll keep tabs on that one. Yvonne Mpambara, lawyer, activist, and former independent presidential candidate. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us. Also, many thanks to you, Frank Yiga, DW's correspondent in Kampala, Uganda.
Thank you so much.
Africa is changing. Don't get left behind. Tune in to Africa Link.
For ordinary Ugandans, this issue goes beyond political scandal. It impacts public services, trust in institutions, and whether funds intended for schools, roads, hospitals, and social programs truly reach the people.
The question of whether the president of Uganda is most likely to fight corruption at the parliament is still very scanty. It is really, really highly unlikely without any fundamental structural reforms. The president himself has to check his systems. He has to come up with warning signs. He has to come and control the budget. So if he comes directly to warn his high-ranking officials, he has the powers to disqualify these guys.
I think Museveni can fight corruption, but of course many Ugandans question whether corruption can truly end when senior political officials and also top government leaders continue to face repeated scandals.
Yes, I believe that President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is going to put an extinction to corruption in Parliament. We all knew that the former Speaker would be the current, would come back as the Speaker in this 12th Parliament, but she's nowhere. Why? Because of the allegations that are upon her head, allegations of corruption. So by the fact that the Speaker and her team are not there, the former Speaker, that proves to you that President Museveni this time is not ready to see any kind of corruption in the Parliament but other departments in the whole country.
This matters because Parliament is meant to serve the public, not enrich its members. When lawmakers are accused of abusing funds, weakening oversight or profiting from corruption, it erodes trust not just in parliament, but in democracy itself. Can a political system built over decades truly hold itself accountable? That is the question. Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. And I am Eddie Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.